Hey YouTube family, welcome back to my channel. I'm Mariesa for those who are new. Thank you for joining me today. Please don't forget to subscribe below in order to get more encouragement, more inspiration, and motivation on how you can live your best dash. Today I am so excited because my dear friend LaWanda McCreary is here. She's going to share her awesome testimony called God Winks. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. But just a little bit about LaWanda real quickly before we start. LaWanda is a pastor's wife. She's a devoted mother. She is a communications strategist. LaWanda is a blogger and she has her own podcast entitled A Moment of Encouragement. It can be found on Google, Apple, or even Spotify podcast platforms. Please check her out. But without further ado, let's head over to the interview.
Hello.
Hey, LaWanda, how are you?
Doing all right.
So I've already introduced you, so I'm so glad that you're here with me. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to you for you to give your awesome testimony of what the Lord has done for you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I like to call my journey or my testimony God Wink. A wink is defined as closing and opening one eye quickly to indicate that something is a joke or a secret or a signal of affection. And my testimony I'm going to share with you now is full of what I like to call God winks. It's his way of showing me he was there and that everything would be all right. And so I'll get to it. In 2019, I would embark on a journey that I didn't expect. Like, it never crossed my mind in a million years that it would be something that I would have to walk out. My husband and I, we met in 2017. We're married in August of 2018. And by October, I found out that I was pregnant with my first child at 41 years old. Yeah, y'all heard that right. Outside of really like bad morning sickness in the beginning, everything was going good. On March 6, 2019, I went to my OBGYN for an appointment, for a regular prenatal appointment. By that time, I was about 26 weeks in a couple days. And my blood pressure was higher than it normally was when I go to the doctor. And so I asked the doctor about it because that was alarming to me. And the doctor was like, yeah, I noticed that too. Let's wait until the end of the appointment. We'll check it again. You know, it just could be, you know, you walking in here and all of that could have made it escalate. So we get through the appointment, we get to the end, and it's still at that number. And so the doctor decides, you know what, let's do some lab work. And I want you to do a 24-hour urine collection just for us to check some things. So I'm like, okay. And then I returned, I think that was a Tuesday. That Friday, I returned back to the doctor on March 8th. And my blood pressure was even higher. So by this time on Friday, just in the span of 2 days, we were up in like the high 130s to the high 80s. And I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And so they were still waiting on my lab work to come back. So they was like, just go home. We'll call you if something comes up. Well, that Saturday, the doctor called and my lab work was showing that my kidneys and liver were in a moment of distress. Like something was going on in my body that was causing them to be in distress, as well as I had high levels of protein in my system. So for them, they were concerned that I had preeclampsia. I had never heard of it before this moment. And so they're asking me, because they're concerned about preeclampsia, they're asking me if I'm having any other symptoms. You know, are you seeing black spots? Do you have a headache? Are you dealing with abdominal pain? And I'm like, no, I have nothing besides my blood pressure being up, which you also, there is nothing else going on with me. And so they were like, okay, come back Monday, which would have been March 11th, for another blood pressure check. Okay, we go through get through the weekend. Of course, we're praying. It's like, what's going on? Monday comes and I go to a doctor's office. And this time they sent me to another location that was connected to the hospital. And they take my blood pressure. And in the matter of Friday to Monday, my blood pressure has jumped to 172 over 101. And so this is alarming to me. They put me in a wheelchair. They immediately rode me over to the OB emergency department. And I get in there and they do more lab work. And they're like, you're not going home. Your lab work has deteriorated even more, to the point your kidneys and liver have started to shut down. And at this point, they are shocked that I am not showing any other signs outside of what they're able to read. No headache, no abdominal pain, no abnormal swelling or anything like that. So they're looking at me in amazement, like, how are you not having any other symptoms? I'm like, okay, God, like, you got this, because I would have had no way of knowing that this was going on inside of me. So they officially diagnosed me with severe preeclampsia. And for those who don't know, preeclampsia can cause stroke, seizures, heart failure, blindness. It can lead to what they call HELP syndrome. Like, there are women I know who have gone through this and did not make it out the hospital. So I'm just like, at this point, I'm grateful that they're catching it. And so I was admitted to the hospital on the antenatal unit. And they had me on the unit, and they would have it on the board every day. With my goal was to keep me pregnant into 34 weeks and to keep my blood pressure down. And I'm looking at, when they tell me that, I'm just like, wait a minute, it's March 11th. 34 weeks is May. I got to be in the hospital to May. And like, that was the thing that was in my mind. I'm like, okay, God, I got to trust you. Like, this is out of my control. There's nothing else I can do. I got to trust you. While the ED team is prepping me, at this point, my case is to the point they have to transfer me to the main hospital. So while the ED team is prepping me and getting everything ready so I can be transferred, I called my mom, who at the time was living in Washington, D.C., and she began to pray with me. And of course, I'm just an emotional wreck with all the what's going to happen, what ifs, and all of that. And the tears are flowing down my face. And so I closed my eyes to shut out everything that was going on around me. And my mom is praying. And then I notice the room gets quiet. And so I'm looking at, I peek my eyes open, and the nurses who were assigned to me have stopped what they were doing, and they are touching me on the bed, agreeing with us in prayer. That for me was a God wink. That was God's way of showing me, I'm here. I haven't left you. I haven't forsaken you. You're going to be all right. And so they transferred me over to the main hospital. I made it to 28 weeks, which is the first day of the third trimester, when they decided to do an ultrasound to check my son's growth in the womb. And as the ultrasound tech is checking things out, I asked how he was doing. You know, how did he look? And she let me know he was weighing smaller than what he should be for 28 weeks. And I would later find out one of the complications of preeclampsia is restrictive growth. So he was weighing the size of a baby that would be 24 or 25 weeks at that point. So the ultrasound techs leave. My nurse comes in that morning, who I had a couple times before, because at this point I'm about a week and a half in on the unit. And we're going through our morning conversation, and she's taking my vitals and asking all the questions, and her phone rings. And I could tell whoever she was talking to was standing outside of my door talking. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? I would soon learn it was the fetal medicine doctor. And so when the ultrasound tech was in the room checking his size, what she found out was that my placenta had totally shut down. And so I was diagnosed with diagnostic flow reversal, meaning there was no blood flow going to my baby. My placenta had just totally stopped working, and it conked out. And so had they not did an ultrasound that morning, my child would have died within the womb, and we would have had no way of knowing, because there was nothing to tell us he wasn't receiving life from me anymore. Another God wink. So of course they advised me that I would have to deliver him that morning. And of course the emotions are flowing. I'm like, okay, I just found out he's 3 weeks smaller than he should be. I'm only 28 weeks. You know, y'all told me to get me to 34 weeks for the best survival of him, and all these emotions are going. And of course, fear is trying to creep in. And I call my mom, and she's praying and everything. I call my husband, And I tell him, call my sister, and they leave work and they're headed there. And we begin, so the doctors come in, we begin talking about the delivery plan. Would it be a vaginal delivery or a C-section? At this point, I want what's best for the baby. At this point, I don't even care about me. Like, I will survive. What's best for the baby? And so as we are discussing this, everybody's in the room, we're discussing this. I look up, we notice that the baby's heartbeat sounds different. So everybody immediately goes to the monitor, and his heartbeat drops, and it takes it a minute to come back up. And what we were able to see from the monitor is that I had a contraction that I did not feel. And that little contraction was too much for him to handle. So then they were able to determine right then and then, you can't have a normal delivery. We have to do emergency C-section. Another God week. Like, God knew he wouldn't survive. What way for me to go through the delivery process and all of that to go on? No, he caught it before we went there. Another God wink. So as we're waiting for the surgical team to come get me, the director of the antenatal unit comes in with a balloon to celebrate me making it to 28 weeks, because they celebrate, you know, those milestones on them. She was like, you made it to 28 weeks. And she's all excited when she comes in, but she's noticing that I'm sitting there in tears crying. So she goes, wait, what's going on? What happened? So I told her everything that happened that morning. And she looked at me and my husband. She was like, can I pray? And I was like, of course you can pray. Another God wink. He's setting me up for everything before I go in. So not only does she pray, though, because she was over the antenatal unit and labor delivery, she started rearranging the nursing staff. So because she wanted a certain nurse to go with me in the OR. When the nurse comes in the room, she says, okay, what kind of music you want? And I was like, can you please give me worship music? She was like, got you. From my room all the way to the OR, they played worship music for me. And I was like, okay, God wink. Like, you're setting the atmosphere for me to go through what for me was a traumatic experience, especially for my first pregnancy. You're setting the atmosphere for me. You're setting the atmosphere for my son to come in, who was going to need this miracle from you. God wink. God wink. So on March 21 at 11:55 a.m., I would give birth to Christian Michael McCreary, weighing 1 pound, 11 ounces. And I was sitting there thinking like, okay, this is going to take the biggest God wink ever. Cause I remember, when the doctor took him out and he showed him to me, like, he was so small, the doctor could hold him like in the palm of his hands. And he was so young and so small, he couldn't open his eyes. And in my head, like, everything is happening so fast. And I remember, you know, on TV and my friends, when the baby come out, they cry. And I'm like, is he going to cry? Like, I need to hear him cry. And this little faintest cry comes out and I just lose it. And I'm like, okay, God, you got him. Like, you let me hear that. You know, I needed to hear that. You let me hear that. And they rush him off and get him ready. And of course, he goes to the NICU. And with 3 days of being born, he was diagnosed with a hole in his heart. And so he has this hole in his heart. And at that point, he's fighting to even breathe on his own. Even with all of the medications they had him on, with all of the machines they had him hooked up to. I remember they had to change out his machines in the first couple of days because his lungs were so severely underdeveloped that he was really struggling. It was painful for him to try to breathe on his own. And so I knew when they told me he had a hole in his heart, I was like, my baby can't take surgery this small, this young, and all of this. And I was like, God, I need you to work something out. So the doctor was like, you know what? We'll start with medication first. If the medication doesn't work, then we're going to have to look at surgery. And I was like, God, I need you to do a quick work. Within a matter of days, I want to say something like 3 to 7 days, the hole went from a large hole to a small hole. And it was small enough that they were like, it'll close on its own. There's no need for us to do surgery. God wink. So our journey from there would continue for 90 days. Within that time frame, he was diagnosed with chronic lung disease, malnutrition, deficiency of adrenal hormone, eye disease of prematurity, anemia, and GERD. I'm telling you, people tell you the NICU journey is a roller coaster ride, and it really is. And so after 90 days in the NICU, for every day we felt like we took 2 steps forward, that there would be a day we felt like we took 3 steps back. After 90 days, Christian came home. He came home on oxygen, medication for anemia in his lungs. But by November of that year, he was off oxygen. Within a couple months, then he was off some more medication. Fast forward to today, he is off all medication. He is a very little busybody, walking, running, climbing, talking, a God wink. It was a God wink to watch his journey from coming in, being the little small hold in his hand, to where he is today is a total God wink. And some things he is at his chronological age of development. At some things he is at what they call the corrective age, which is, had he been born in June instead of March, he's on target. So in some things he's advanced, some things he's on target. It's a God thing. But one thing before I finish, one of the things I really want to point out is something that I realized a few months ago. And when I look at it now, I was like, well, this was actually the first God wink. I'm thinking the fact that they were able to catch this, with me not having any external symptoms was it. But the first God wink happened March 5th, 2019. So a couple months ago, I have a prayer journal that I write my prayers out in. Sometimes it's just what God has said to me. Sometimes it's just clearing out my head and pouring out my heart. But this particular day, it happened to be something God was speaking to me. And God was encouraging me to get back to being consistent in my prayer time and in my word. And so it made me think about something that you have in your book, where in the section of the book, you were talking about your mom's passing. And you said there was a period in which you felt so disconnected from God, even before your mom passed. So her short illness and her quick passing was the icing on the cake for you. And that stuck out to me because it was like what God was advising me on March 5th was preparing me for what I was getting ready to endure. And had I not been praying, had I not been in my word, I know for a fact I would not have survived that journey. And I tell, like, my mom is confirmation. I told my mom, I said, the enemy tried to make me lose my mind during that period. But I know because God had prepared me and set me up before that I was ready for it. I was ready to endure. And I remember a time I was standing in the shower just bawling. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And God said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. You got this. My grace is sufficient for you. But had I not been in the place of preparation of reading and praying before time, I would have missed hearing God say that to me, speak that to me, encourage me. And so even recently, as I was studying, I came across something and it said, we easily see God as being a good God, but oftentimes people miss seeing him as a God who cares. And my God winks were showing me he's not only a good God, he's a God who cares. And all the God winks through that journey, the God winks since then has brought to life to me 1 Peter 5:7, which I like the Amplified version. It says, casting all your cares, all your anxieties, all your worries, and all your concerns once and for all on him, for he cares about you with deepest affection and watches over you very carefully. 2020, I think, has been a rough time for people. The global pandemic, in our family, we've had a lot of deaths. Extended family have experienced death. You got the economic turmoil, the political divide, and everything that's going on. And God wants you to know he cares. If you look around in your life, look for the God winks that lets you know that he cares. And that's my testimony.
Listen, I had to be over here on mute because my yes would have just interrupted your whole interview, okay? Listen, I had to hold those tears back, but you know, some of it I didn't know. The part about the nurses touching you, and I was just like, oh Lord, yes. But like some of it I didn't know, but a lot of it I did. But I'm just grateful. I'm grateful to see him on social media, and he's pointing to his nose, he's pointing to his ears, everything that he's doing. Everything. I mean, the boy is bright. He is bright, and he's busy. So he's busy.
He's busy. We gotta watch what we say because he's repeating words.
Yeah, listen, don't cuss, no. But yeah, we definitely praise God for Christian and the journey that God's brought him through, how he kept your mind. I know how that is to have that in your mind, like, oh, God, where are you? You know, and
yes.
That is encouraging. I'm so grateful that you shared a testimony with us. I pray that it blesses everyone who watches. I pray it bless you to be able to, you know, give it again. And just a couple questions, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind.
For parents who have experienced or may experience one day the NICU journey, preeclampsia or anything like that. And I already know the answer to this question. But for those watching who may, you know, want to know, you know, more specifically, the number one thing that you did to get you through that time, like what is the absolute number one thing that if you had to go back and experience it again, that you would not change?
One of the things, a friend of mine's, and her first child, she had I want to say 100-day NICU journey. And her child was born with spina bifida. And so she reached out to me and she said, journal. Journaling is going to be your best friend through this. Journal. And so and that's what I did. And it just so happened while I was on the antenatal unit, my boss came to visit me and she brought me, not knowing what was to come. I'm telling you, God winks all through it. She just wanted me to have something to do while I was there in the unit. And she went to Target and brought me all these little snacks. And she brought me a pink journal and the front of it said faith. And my boss is not saved. My boss is not, she will tell you I'm not religious or anything. God wink. And so she brought me, and when my friend told me that, she said, journal. I would write down everything the doctor said. And then I would pray about it. Sometimes I would write the prayer, and then I would find scriptures to support what I needed, the ground I was standing on. Even when I had, of course, I'm at the hospital all the time with him being in NICU. So most times I use the Bible app. I would highlight those scriptures in a different color so that when I went, they would stand out to me. So anything that is highlighted in that app in orange were scriptures given to me during that journey. And so when I would write it down, and then for every update, I would write down what they said and what I was standing on. And my prayers in that journal became specific. If it was his lungs, I was speaking to every muscle and every fiber and the bronchial tubes. And I was breaking it down. And I would ask the doctor, okay, what does this mean? And when they tell me, well, this is connected to this and this. And when I went to prayer, okay, God, bless this and touch this and connect this to this. I was not leaving anything out. And while God knows all things, he didn't need me to break it down like that. But it brought me comfort to know I'm breaking down everything. Journaling and finding scriptures and prayers kept me connected. In those times where I was just, it is an emotional roller coaster. And those times where it was just like, okay, I can't do this on my own. Your support system is critical. It's critical. I had to shut out any naysayers. Anybody, I love everybody, but I needed people who were going to be able to speak life, speak faith, speak the word. And I had to connect with those people. And that was critical for me during that time.
I love it. I knew it was going to have the word and prayer in there. And you know, I love a good journal. So, and the boss
Yes.
was not a believer, but they brought you a journal that said faith.
Right.
So the Lord is working.
Right.
Just my last question. Was there ever a time that you maybe had to advocate for a Christian, like something that you had to speak up about? Maybe they were insisting on something, but something in your spirit or God spoke to you about something and you had to like advocate for him.
There were, I'm trying to think. There wasn't a time. I'm trying to think with him. His care they were so good. I'm trying to think of, yes, now I remember. So prior to this point in my life, years ago, I was having back trouble and wound up having to have surgery for a breast reduction. And so the doctor had told me then, you won't be able to breastfeed. I'm like, okay, no big deal. And so fast forward to this time, and you know the benefits of breast milk and all this other stuff. And I'm like, okay. Thankfully, the hospital we have him at, they have a milk bank. And so parents who make a lot of milk or have excess, it goes just the same way when you donate blood. It goes through a process or whatever. And so we were able to use donor milk for his tube feedings. But I was like, I still want to be a part. Like I had to wait 10 days before I could hold him. So it leaves you with this helpless feeling of I can't do anything. And then I'm watching all these moms around me who are able to bring in their breast milk. And the lactation nurse came and she said, let's just try it. And I said, well, there were no changes. So I really don't think I produced anything. We went in the lactation room and tried it. And every day I could produce just enough for them to feed him, to swab his mouth with it. So at least he was getting my antibodies to help him fight. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna keep doing. And even though it wasn't a lot to others, it was a lot to me. And so a nurse came in and I brought in my little tube. I mean, when I say little vials, y'all, they were little vials, but they were my little vials. And so I brought them in and he had a nurse. She was like, oh, well, like she waved it off nonchalant. And here I am, the lactation nurse is saying, no, Ma, every little bit you get helps. And she's saying, well, you really can stop doing this because it's not doing much for him. And it bothered me so. And I was like, I said, well, the lactation nurse, well, they just tell you that so you can feel involved. Like she was nonchalant and it just bothered me so. And I was like, no, I want my son to have this. Like it's a little bit, but my little bit is going to make a difference for him. Because in my head, my little bit is anointed and it's going to make a difference for him. And so that thing bothered me. It bothered me. And here's another God wink. I contemplated whether to say anything because I'm like, they're caring for my son. I can't be there 24 hours a day. I don't want anything to happen to him. And without opening my mouth to anybody's manager, without opening my mouth to the nurse, another nurse came and she was like, you make a difference. I'm going to keep adding this. She said, we have a couple days for this. She said, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add up all your vials so he can have his first full feeding from you. And I was like, thank you. And that made a difference. That was me. And it was like me advocating for him, but God advocating for me. And it was like this one package deal. Don't come for God's people. He cares for us, y'all. But like medically wise, there was nothing that they wanted to do. Like I was prepared to like stand my ground with the whole heart surgery, but God didn't even let me have to even go there. But I've known parents who, no, I know my child. This is what's best. This is what I want to do. And you have to do that. You know your child. And sometimes that environment can be intimidating because it is a different circumstance. And it's like you want to trust the medical professions, but at the same time, you know your child. You carry that child. For me, I made it to my 3rd trimester, but that is still my baby. And I still wanted what's best for him. And when you're a believer and you're filled, the Spirit will also give you the boldness, give you the spirit of discernment to be able to know what's best for your child as well.
Yes, and be able to even, direct you on when to say something, when not to, and all that good stuff.
Yes. Yes.
Well, this has been so exciting. This has been awesome. I loved hearing your testimony, and thank you so, so much for being willing to share that to help
Of course.
someone.
Of
I
course.
appreciate you.
Of course. I love you.
I love you too. I'll talk to you in a little while.
All right.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Oh my goodness, that testimony was so awesome. And we both pray that someone is encouraged by it. Someone is motivated. Someone sees God in their journey themselves. So I'll see you next time. And remember, living your best dash doesn't mean that everything's perfect, but it means you choose to make the best of any circumstance or situation you're given.